All right, so like imagine this. Okay. You're at the absolute top, right? Like everybody knows your name. You're killing it. But then suddenly, boom, this huge accusation appears in the news, and now everybody's questioning everything about you. That's what Kylian Mbappé is dealing with right now.
Wild.
Yeah, and I mean, for anyone who may not follow football super closely, Mbappé is a phenomenal athlete, like truly a global superstar, currently playing for Real Madrid. But these days, the headlines haven't exactly been about his, goals.
Right.
So, yeah, this serious accusation pops up, and it's caused this whole investigation to be opened in Stockholm. And while we're still waiting on a lot of the details to come out, and Mbappe's lawyer, Marie-Alix Canu-Bernard, came out strong, stating right away for the record that he has nothing to reproach himself for.
It's that whole thing of, like, navigating the court of public opinion, which, I mean, let's be real, that could be just as brutal as any courtroom, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And Canu-Bernard uses this interesting phrase, actually, to describe what it's like for someone in Mbappe's position. She calls it living in a bubble. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a phrase we hear a lot, for sure, but it's definitely worth, unpacking a bit. Like, picture this whole web of agents, lawyers, publicists, the whole 9 yards, all working nonstop, 24/7, to shape how the world sees you. That's the bubble in a nutshell. And a lot of times, it's not even really about physical protection as much as it is about, controlling the narrative.
So it's less about being, like, hidden away in some massive estate somewhere and more about having this, like, super carefully constructed public image.
Exactly. And like any bubble, things can get a little distorted. If you think back on other celebrity situations, a lot of times this whole being isolated thing leads to, well, not the best choices. It's easy to become disconnected from how the public actually sees you. The bubble becomes kind of like an echo chamber.
Yeah, you would think with all those advisors, someone would be like, hey, maybe this isn't a good look.
And that's actually the scary part. Sometimes surrounding yourself with people who just tell you what you want to hear, it just feeds into that bubble instead of, like, popping it. But going back to Mbappé for a second, what I find interesting is how his lawyer seems to be sort of building a defense in advance, even though there aren't even any formal charges yet.
You're right. She was really specific about it, too, mentioning his busy schedule, the fact that he has security with him all the time, even bringing up the possibility of hotel security footage. It's almost like she's, laying the groundwork to, like, dismantle a case that hasn't even really been built yet.
It's definitely a bold move. And it's one we've seen before in these really high-profile celebrity cases, too. Remember that whole thing a few years back with, what was their name? Security footage ended up being the key to clearing their name. I think Canu-Bernard is probably trying to, like, plant that seed of doubt now, early on.
And there's that whole other strategic layer, too, right? Like, Canu-Bernard hasn't actually, gone and filed some big slander lawsuit yet. It's like they're waiting to see if Mbappé is actually officially named.
Yeah, totally. Talk about a calculated risk.
Right.
It definitely conserves resources and, avoids making the whole situation even bigger before they have to. It could be a really smart move if these accusations just kind of disappear.
Yeah, it's total high-stakes poker face.
Totally.
But then there's the other side of it. You've got Mbappé dealing with this insane amount of pressure, even with a legal team that's like the best of the best. The mental and emotional toll of something like this has got to be immense.
Oh, absolutely. Can you imagine the weight of, like, everything suddenly on your shoulders? Every single thing you do, every word you say, analyzed under a microscope. I mean, there's tons of research on athletes, and, even though they might seem invincible out there on the field, they're still vulnerable to stress and anxiety, just like anyone else.
It's easy to forget, right? There's a real person in the middle of all of this. And it's not even just like the accusation itself. It's the media going crazy, social media blowing up, the possibility of your reputation and career being damaged.
Exactly. And that's where that whole bubble thing we were talking about is like a double-edged sword, Because on the one hand, yeah, it gives you a support system, a way to block out some of the noise. But then on the other hand, it can also turn into this echo chamber where you're totally isolated from what's really going on.
So having those good people, the right people around you, that becomes even more important in situations like this.
For sure, 100%. It's about having people who'll be real with you, give you honest feedback, even if it's tough to hear. People who can help you zoom out, see the bigger picture and all that, instead of just getting caught up in the crisis of the moment.
And I'm sure that's even harder when you're also expected to perform at such a high level. I keep thinking about that line in the article where Canu-Bernard mentions hoping that Mbappé can still focus on, like, his next match.
It really shows you the kind of pressure these athletes are under, right?
Yeah.
Like they're just expected to compartmentalize, to like go out there and perform, even with all this other stuff going on. That's a lot to deal with.
The show must go on thing, which actually, that makes me think, what about the actual investigation itself? What's going on with that in Stockholm? Like, what do we actually know about how it's all unfolding?
Honestly, details are pretty scarce right now, which, to be fair, that's kind of typical when an investigation is just starting out, especially one this big.
Yeah.
It seems like the authorities are keeping things, pretty tightly controlled.
Well, yeah. I mean, which makes sense,
Well, yeah.
given how sensitive the accusation is. Yeah, totally.
And it's important for us to remember, right? Like an investigation doesn't automatically equal, guilt. It's a whole process.
Yeah.
And it needs time and space to, actually play out.
Exactly. Like, jumping to conclusions doesn't help anybody. I mean, we've seen it so many times, how public opinion can just spiral totally out of control before we even have all the facts. It's a good reminder for all of us, honestly, to like take a step back for a second, avoid spreading misinformation and all that, especially these days with like instant news and social media always right there.
Oh, for sure. Critical thinking, healthy skepticism, those are so important no matter who the story's about.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, while we wait for this investigation to run its course, you can't help but wonder what the impact's going to be on Mbappé long term, right? Even if he's totally cleared, stuff like this can still leave a mark.
Yeah, without a doubt, reputations are so fragile. And the court of public opinion, like we said, it moves way faster than any, actual legal process.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how Mbappé and his team handle things going forward.
Right. Like, do they try to take control of the narrative? Or do they lay low and wait for it all to blow over? It's such a high-stakes game, and not just on the field, right?
And I think that's actually the biggest point here. This whole case is not just about, one athlete or one accusation. It's like we're seeing all the pressures and complexities of fame, especially in this day and age, all playing out right in front of us.
We're so quick to judge, to form opinions and all that, but I feel like we rarely actually stop and think about what it must be like to be in that position, to be in that spotlight, especially when accusations like this come up.
Totally. So, yeah, this deep dive, it's given us a lot to think about, that's for sure. The power of how we perceive things, the strategies people use, and the impact it can all have on a human being.
It reminds you that behind every single headline, every post you see online, there's a whole human story unfolding, always more complex than it seems from the outside.
Well said. We'll definitely keep following this case closely as it develops, and we'll be back to break it all down as new information comes out.
For now, though, we'll leave you with this. How would you handle a situation like this? Like, if you were advising Mbappé, what would your strategy be? Something to think about until next time.